Hi Ryan, I'm in Panama again now. I just flew back here on Tuesday from Cuba, but yeah, it was amazing experience in Cuba. On Saturday, the 26th of November, the Cuban government organized a little ceremony at the Matachin Museum in Baracoa, the oldest city in Cuba. And they also brought down the son and three other female members of the last ruling Taino chief in Cuba from their mountain village in Guantanamo to thank us for making the Guama documentary movie and also to introduce themselves and express solidarity and whatnot. So that was very moving experience, for everyone. Um, yeah, I'm finding a lot of support from the Cuban and Venezuelan governments for the grassroots indigenous filmmaking that I started doing last November in Barbados with the production of the first completed documentary, which was The Last Arawak Girl, 17th century, The Last Arawak Girl Born in Barbados, a 17th century tale. Those books are available at the Cloister bookstores as well as Carter's bookstore in Wildy. Um, Unfortunately, not available in the Barbados Museum gift shop yet. I don't know why. But anyway, it's yeah, this grassroots indigenous filmmaking that I am able to achieve is something that and I would like more support from the Barbados government because it's not as limited in scope as one might imagine. It's not just dealing with quote unquote Arawaks and Caribs and whatnot. And it goes beyond that. I mean, if the government of St. Vincent was in support, I could easily do a documentary about the life of the great Garifuna chief Chataye. If the government of Dominica was willing to support, I could easily do a documentary on the life of the greatest Kalinago chief, Caleb Warner, in the history of the Lesser Antilles. So I mean, the sky could do movies about the great Maroon chiefs of Jamaica. So it's not something that's only of benefit to Barbados or only benefit to Cuba. In this case, the Guama movie is about the last great Taino chief of Cuba. Everyone knows about Hatwe, Chief Hatwe, but his rebellion was short-lived, whereas Guama's lasted a whole decade and dominated the Sierra Maestra Mountains much as Fidel and Che Guevara did, 430 years later. A small guerrilla army paralyzing the national forces in their mountain refuge and fighting for justice and liberty. Yes, you're correct. That's another point too. No, it's not. I'm not bragging, although people tend to criticize me for say that I brag too much or whatever. But I'm just stating the facts. There's no one able to produce indigenous historic period documentaries more economically than I am. This last Guama film was done on a 10,000 US dollar budget. The first one I did in Barbados was much less because everything was locally on hand. But I mean, that is kind of unheard of figures that you're talking about there. And I mean, I'm no experienced film producer or filmmaker. I'm just a director. The production and post-production is done by expert in Caracas. A native friend of mine over there who is one of their top film producers. He has like 25 movies to his credit, including one with Danny Glover. So all the production and post-production work is done in Caracas, and the Venezuelan government assists in that also. So I mean, there are other things too. For example, I put the idea since last November when the Barbados government offered to fund the movie I wanted to do in Barbados, and we had a whole bunch of people lined up to help collaborate on that, make it truly impressive. But I'm still waiting on the funds promised a year ago to materialize. And that's the problem in the Caribbean. I think we tend to look at people from outside with more enthusiasm and be faster to back them in what they're trying to do than our own homegrown talent. Yes, I'm an amateur film director. I never went to film school. I just woke up literally one day, October last year, and said, you know what? I'm going to start making indigenous Caribbean films, and nobody's going to be able to make them more authentically than me. This is because I have a network of indigenous friends, allies, and supporters that stretches throughout the Pan-Caribbean region, from Cuba in the north, the San Blas Islands off Panama, and the far west Caribbean Sea to Dominica, St. Vincent, Trinidad, Guyana in the south. So I'm able to achieve the trust and cooperation with native communities that a totally foreign, non-indigenous film producer is unlikely to obtain. We can harness this, I think. This just needs the political will to be behind the effort. Another thing too, I mean, even something that would add to Barbados UNESCO's National Heritage Site of Bridgetown, I can bring my people up from Guyana and literally rebuild the Arawak wooden bridge that was across what is now called the Constitution River. The location of where it was is formerly is known, and we could do this for a pittance, but it would be another tourist attraction, and it would be in fact the only Amerindian bridge ever recorded in the Lesser Antilles. We can recreate that. It's just a matter of the government saying, okay, we like the idea, here are the funds, go ahead and do it. It's as simple as that. We've been ready, rip-raring to go since last October, but just not getting the follow-through on the verbal commitments that were made by the Ministry of Culture last November, unfortunately. Yes, Rian, and that's another point too. I am burning to do a documentary film which I believe, based on some archaeological evidence that I have come into hand in the last year or so, as well as other circumstantial evidence and other records from the period by Spanish and the Portuguese, even the English. I can do a documentary that proves that at least one ship from the 1311 fleet that departed from Mali to cross the Atlantic in West Africa did arrive in Barbados. I don't want to reveal all the juicy details, but I think that should be of interest to all Barbadians, because and also it plays into I can show and demonstrate how the Garifuna and St. Vincent are actually descendants of those Malians, and not, as was erroneously claimed, just some escapees from a ship that wrecked on St. Vincent. I have found surnames among the Garifuna and St. Vincent that correspond to names of members of the royal family of Mali that crossed the Atlantic. So I mean, come on now, that's no coincidence. You preserve the lineages by continuing with the names. So that's another. Then you had the Tainos telling Columbus that African traders were coming up from the direction of the Lesser Antilles to Puerto Rico and the Greater Antilles, and doing a peaceful trade with them, long before Columbus reached. So I can prove that and have that film done, at least the part about the one ship reaching Barbados shores and interacting peacefully and in a spirit of genuine cooperative appreciation, unlike the arrival of Columbus, which was totally about domination and conquest. I can prove that the Africans not only came before, that they reached Barbados before, but they came, with peace and love and positive intentions, just commercial trade and exploration. There was no attempt to subdue and conquer the native population. And I have Portuguese linguists, who told me, as a matter of fact, that the name for Barbados, Los Barbados, does not refer to inanimate objects like bearded fig trees, as some people want to believe, but actually it refers to bearded people. And no Amerindians anywhere have beards, but I do know personally, for example, a Taino lady who has an African husband, and every single one of her sons has a full beard. So I mean, that is just a lot of circumstantial evidence, as well as I found evidence in Barbados, as well as in other islands. In St. Thomas, they actually found skeletal remains of 2 African males that date from that same time period in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So there's more than enough evidence to prove that the Africans did arrive over a century and a half before Columbus. So, but I can do that film in Barbados using local actors and tell the story, I think, quite poetically and with a certain local flair that everyone can appreciate. So that's something that I really want to get done too early in 2023. But again, it will depend on the support of the Ministry of Culture and whatnot to do that as well.